Commander Jiwon stared at the dead planet through the viewport of her research ship. Terminus 7th looked like a giant gray rock floating in space. No oceans, no clouds, no signs of life anywhere. Just endless stretches of dust and ancient ruins that poked up from the surface like broken teeth. "Another beautiful vacation spot," Minho said as he joined her at the window. The xenobiologist always made jokes when he was nervous. "I can see why the tourism board recommended this place." Jiwon smiled despite herself. "The Galactic Confederation thinks there might be something important down there. Ancient technology or historical records. That's why they sent us. Important enough to risk our necks on a planet that's been dead for thousands of years," Soman added from her station. The tactical analyst was checking their defensive systems for the 10th time that morning. "The readings are strange, Commander. There's definitely something artificial down there, but it's not showing up clearly on our scans." Hyun-woo looked up from his communications console. "Still no response from the surface. Whatever's down there, it's not talking to us." He paused and adjusted his headset. "But I'm picking up some kind of low-frequency signal. Very faint. It's almost like background noise, but there's a pattern to it." Jiwon nodded and moved to the captain's chair. Her team was small but skilled. They had worked together for 3 years, exploring dead worlds and ancient sites across the Outer Rim. Most of their missions were routine: catalog some ruins, take samples, file reports. But something about Terminus 7 felt different. "Take us down to the largest structure cluster," she ordered. "Keep our shields up and weapons ready. I know this place is supposed to be empty, but let's not take any chances." The ship descended through the thin atmosphere. The surface looked even worse up close. Jagged mountains of black stone stretched to the horizon, broken by deep canyons that seemed to go down forever. In the distance, they could see the ruins, massive crystal formations that rose from the ground like frozen lightning. "Those aren't natural formations," Minho said, studying his scanner readings. "The crystal structure is too perfect, too organized. Someone built these things." "Built them or grew them?" Soman asked. "Some alien species use biological engineering to create their cities. Hard to tell from up here. We'll need to get closer." Jiwon guided the ship to a flat area near the base of the largest crystal tower. The structure was enormous, at least a kilometer tall and perfectly transparent. Through its walls, they could see complex patterns of light moving like trapped. "Lightning! Landing sequence complete," she announced. "Atmosphere is breathable but thin. Gravity is about 80% of Earth normal. Everyone suit up and stay close. We don't know what kind of defenses this place might have." The team gathered in the airlock, checking their equipment one final time. Each carried a portable scanner, emergency supplies, and a standard plasma rifle. Jiwon also brought a data recorder. If they found anything important, they needed to document it properly. The surface of Terminus 7 was eerily quiet. No wind, no sounds of any kind. Just the crunch of their boots on the dusty ground and the hum of their life support systems. The crystal towers loomed above them, casting strange shadows that seemed to shift and move, even though nothing was blocking the weak sunlight. "The main entrance appears to be over here," Soman called out. She was standing next to what looked like a smooth section of crystal wall. There are symbols carved into the surface. I can't read them, but they look deliberate. Hyunwoo approached with his scanner. The communication signal is stronger here. It's definitely coming from inside the structure. He placed his hand on the crystal surface and jumped back in surprise. It's warm. Warm how? Jiwon asked. Like body temperature. And I think it reacted to my touch. The patterns inside got brighter for a second. Minho was taking readings with his biological scanner. Commander, this crystal isn't just a building material. It's showing signs of organic activity. Very faint, but it's there. Like it's sleeping or dormant. Jiwon studied the symbols on the wall. They were unlike anything in the Confederation databases. Flowing lines that seemed to twist and change depending on how she looked at them. But as she stared, something strange happened. The symbols began to make sense, not in any language she knew, but she could feel their meaning. "Welcome," she whispered. "What did you say?" Soman asked. "The symbols. They say welcome in... I don't know how I know that." Jiwon reached out and touched the crystal wall. The moment her gloved hand made contact, the entire structure began to glow. Light raced up the crystal tower like liquid fire. The patterns inside became more complex, more active, and then, with a sound like breaking glass, a doorway opened in the wall. "Well," Minho said nervously, "that's either a very good sign or a very bad one." The passage beyond the doorway was wide enough for all four of them to walk side by side. The walls, floor, and ceiling were all made of the same living crystal, glowing with soft blue light that pulsed in rhythm like a heartbeat. Strange symbols appeared and disappeared along the walls as they walked, always just at the edge of their vision. "The air in here is different," Hyunwoo reported. "Higher oxygen content. It's like the building is providing life support for..." "Who?" Soman asked. "This place has been dead for thousands of years." They walked deeper into the crystal structure, following passages that twisted and turned, but always seemed to lead them toward the center. Jiwon noticed that their footsteps made no sound on the crystal floor, as if the material absorbed all noise. After what seemed like hours, but was probably only 20 minutes, they emerged into a vast circular chamber. The ceiling stretched up into darkness, and the walls were covered with thousands of crystal panels. Each panel showed moving images, star maps, alien faces, scenes of battles and conferences, and worlds they didn't recognize. But it was the center of the chamber that made them all stop and stare. A massive crystal formation rose from the floor, shaped like a tree made of pure light, and embedded in its trunk was something that looked like a data storage device. "It's a library," Jiwon breathed, "or an archive. All these panels are showing historical records." Minho approached one of the wall panels. The images showed a species they had never seen before. Tall, graceful beings with 4 arms and silver skin. "These are definitely not in any Confederation database. How old is this place?" "Old enough to predate the Confederation itself," Hyunwoo said. He was studying his scanner readings with a frown. "Commander, the signal I've been tracking. It's not just communication. It's a data stream. This entire structure is trying to download information into our equipment. What kind of information? Historical records, star charts, linguistic databases. It's huge. Thousands of years' worth of data. He looked up at her with wide eyes. Commander, I think this archive contains the complete history of this section of the galaxy. Ji-Won stared at the central crystal tree. If Hyun-woo was right, they had just discovered the greatest archaeological find in human history. The data in this archive could revolutionize their understanding of galactic civilization. But something bothered her. Why was this place hidden? Why had it been abandoned? And why did it seem to be waiting for them? Download everything you can, she ordered. But keep monitoring for any defensive systems or booby traps. Something this important doesn't get left unguarded. As her team worked, Ji-Won studied the moving images on the wall panels. Most showed alien species she didn't recognize, but occasionally she caught glimpses of something familiar. Ships that looked like early human designs. Faces that could have been human ancestors. Then she saw something that made her blood run cold, a panel showing what was clearly a human figure, but the timestamp indicated the image was over 12,000 years old, long before humans were supposed to have left Earth, long before first contact with the Galactic Confederation. "Hyun-woo," she called, "are you getting this? The archive shows humans in space thousands of years before our official first contact." "I'm seeing it too, Commander, and there's more. According to these records, humans weren't just in space. They were founding members of something called the First Galactic Alliance." Solman looked up from her security scans. "That's impossible. The Confederation has complete records of human first contact. We were a primitive species that barely had space travel when they found us." "Then someone has been lying to us," Ji-Won said grimly. The central crystal tree pulsed brighter, and suddenly new images appeared on the wall panels. Battle scenes showing human soldiers fighting alongside alien allies against creatures that seemed to be made of living shadow. The humans in the images moved with deadly precision, using tactics and weapons that were far more advanced than anything in current human military arsenals. But it was the final set of images that made Ji-Won's heart stop. Official documents with seals she recognized. Galactic Confederation seals. Orders marked with codes like Protocol Omega-7 and Containment Necessary. And at the bottom of each document, the same phrase repeated over and over. Human military participation suspended indefinitely. "Commander," Minho said urgently, "you need to see this. I found a data file specifically about humans. It's marked as highly classified, but the archive seems to be giving us access anyway." Ji-Won hurried over to where Minho was standing. The Confederation ships surrounded Ji-Won's vessel before they could even reach orbit. 6 massive warships, each one big enough to carry 1,000 crew members. Their weapons were powered but not aimed, a clear message that resistance would be useless. "This is Ambassador Kieran of the Velothian Diplomatic Corps," came a voice over their communications. The translator made the alien's words sound smooth and musical. "Commander Park Ji-Won, you and your team will transfer to our flagship immediately. Do not attempt to leave the system." Ji-Won looked at her crew. Minho was pale and nervous. So Min had her hand on her weapon, though they all knew it would be pointless against ships this size. Yunwu was still trying to process the data they had taken from the crystal archive. "Commander," Yunwu whispered, "I managed to copy most of the historical files before we left. The data is encrypted and hidden in our backup systems. If they search our main computers, they won't find it." "Good thinking," Jiwon replied quietly. Then she activated the communication system. "Ambassador Kiran, we are a peaceful research vessel. We were investigating ruins under official Confederation permits. What is the meaning of this detention? All will be explained aboard our ship. Please comply immediately." Jiwon had no choice. Fighting 6 warships with a small research vessel would be suicide. "Prepare for transfer," she told her team. "Stay calm, stick to our story, and don't mention anything about what we found in that archive." The transfer took place in the cargo bay of the Confederation flagship. As soon as they stepped through the airlock, Jiwon could see they were in serious trouble. Armed guards surrounded them, not the usual Confederation peacekeepers, but military soldiers from different species. Tall, blue-skinned Velothians with their elegant features and quick movements. Massive Krugan warriors covered in natural armor. Plating. Even a few of the rare crystalline Zephyrians, their bodies glowing with internal light. Ambassador Kiran approached them. The Velothian was tall and graceful, with silver hair and eyes that seemed to change color in the light. "Commander, Jiwon, I apologize for the dramatic nature of your retrieval. However, your activities on Terminus 7 have created a situation that requires immediate attention." "What situation?" Jiwon asked. "We were conducting approved archaeological research. Research that activated an archive that has been dormant for 12,000 years. An archive that immediately began broadcasting classified historical data across multiple star systems." Kiran's voice remained polite, but there was steel underneath. "Come, the High Council is waiting." They were escorted through corridors that stretched for kilometers inside the massive ship. Jiwon had never seen a vessel this large. The walls were decorated with symbols from dozens of different species, a display of unity that was supposed to represent the Confederation's peaceful cooperation. But the armed guards and locked doors made it clear this was more prison than diplomatic mission. The High Council chamber was enormous, a circular room with seating for representatives from every major species in the galaxy. At the center, a crystalline figure floated several feet above the floor. Chancellor Thymos of the Zephyrian Collective, one of the most powerful beings in known space. "Commander Park Jiwon," Thymos spoke without moving what might have been a mouth. The words seemed to come from the crystal itself. "You have uncovered information that was sealed for the protection of all galactic civilization. We must now decide what to do with both you and that information." Jiwon stepped forward, trying to project confidence she didn't feel. "Chancellor, we are human citizens of the Confederation. We have rights under galactic law. We demand to know what we're being accused of." "You are accused of nothing," said a new voice. General Voss of the Krugan Empire stepped into view. The massive warrior was nearly 3 meters tall, his natural armor scarred from countless battles. You have simply learned something you were never meant to know. And what is that exactly? Chancellor Thymos pulsed with brighter light. The true history of humanity's relationship with the galaxy. The real reason your species is banned from participating in military conflicts. We know the reason, Somin said, speaking for the first time since their capture. Humans are too aggressive, too violent. The ban protects other species from our destructive nature. Several of the alien council members made sounds that might have been laughter. General Voss shook his massive head. That is the story we tell your children, human. The truth is far more complicated. Then tell us the truth, Jiwan demanded. Chancellor Thymos floated closer. Very well. 12,000 years ago, humanity was not the young species you believe yourselves to be. You were founding members of the First Galactic Alliance. Your people fought alongside ours in the greatest war our civilization has ever faced, the conflict against the Void Spawn. Void Spawn? Minho asked. Creatures from dark space, Ambassador Kieran explained. Parasites that consumed entire star systems. They nearly destroyed all life in this galaxy. The war lasted for centuries and cost billions of lives. Humanity's role in that war, General Voss continued, was unique. Your species demonstrated capabilities that disturbed even your allies. Chancellor Thymos projected images into the air above them, scenes of battle that looked like nightmares. Creatures made of living shadow attacking fleets of alien ships. And in the middle of the chaos, human soldiers fighting with tactics that seemed impossible. Your people did not simply fight the Void Spawn, the Chancellor explained. You learned to think like them, to predict their movements, to understand their weaknesses in ways that other species could not. Jiwan stared at the images. That sounds like a good thing. If we were effective against these creatures, why is that a problem? Because of how effective you were, General Voss said grimly. Watch! The images changed. Now they showed a human commander studying captured Void Spawn creatures. The human, a woman with Asian features, seemed to be communicating with the parasites somehow. And as she did, the creatures began to turn on each other. Commander Lee Sora, Ambassador Kieran said quietly, one of your greatest military leaders. She discovered that the Void Spawn hive mind could be manipulated through psychological warfare. By understanding their thought patterns completely, she could turn their own coordination against them. The images showed the results. Entire Void Spawn fleets destroying themselves as their hive mind collapsed into confusion and fear. What should have been humanity's greatest victory in the war? This should have been celebrated, Jiwan said. She saved countless lives. Yes, Chancellor Thymos replied. And that is precisely what terrified us. More images appeared. Human soldiers, in other battles, using tactics that seemed to come from nowhere, adapting to enemy strategies in real time, turning the enemy's own strengths into weaknesses, winning battles that should have been impossible to win. Other species fight using their natural advantages, General Voss explained. Krugen use strength and armor, Velothians use speed and agility, Zephyrians use coordination and collective intelligence. But humans fight by becoming whatever they need to become. Your people don't just adapt to new situations, Ambassador Kieran added. You empathize with your enemies so completely that you can predict their actions, understand their fears, and exploit their psychological weaknesses. It is a terrifying ability. Jiwan was beginning to understand. You're not afraid of human violence. You're afraid of human intelligence. We are afraid of human empathy, Chancellor Thymos corrected. Your ability to understand other minds so completely that you can destroy them from within. When the Void War ended, the other species realized something horrifying. If humans could do this to the Void Spawn, they could do it to anyone. The images changed again, showing what looked like a Confederation meeting from thousands of years ago. Representatives of every species except humans, discussing something in urgent, frightened tones. The sole incident, General Voss said. The final proof that humanity was too dangerous to be allowed unrestricted military access. What happened in Seoul? Hyunwoo asked. A training exercise went wrong, Ambassador Kieran explained. Human military units were practicing anti-insurgency tactics against volunteer alien forces. It was supposed to be a friendly competition. Instead, your people demonstrated that they could psychologically break any species within hours, not through torture or violence, but through perfect understanding of how each species thinks and feels. The room fell silent. Ji-won could see the fear in the aliens' eyes as they remembered something that had happened thousands of years before she was born. So you erased our history, she said finally. Made us think we were a young species. Banned us from military service. All because you were afraid of what we might do if we really tried to win a war. We did what was necessary to preserve galactic peace, Chancellor Thymos replied. Humanity agreed to the arrangement. Your leaders understood the necessity. What? Leaders, Somin demanded. If this happened 12,000 years ago, how could human leaders agree to anything? Before anyone could answer, the chamber's doors opened. An elderly human man walked in, moving slowly but with dignity. His hair was white and his face was lined with age, but his eyes were sharp and intelligent. Because some of us never forgot, he said quietly. Daeho's ship was small and old, but it moved through space faster than anything Jiwan had ever seen. The elderly human sat at the controls with practiced ease, his fingers dancing over buttons and switches that looked decades out of date. Where are we going? Jiwan asked, as they jumped to hyperspace. Behind them, the Confederation fleet was still trying to figure out how they had escaped from the most secure ship in the galaxy. Somewhere safe, Daeho replied. Somewhere the Confederation doesn't know about. There are still places in this galaxy where the old ways are remembered. Minho was studying the ship's interior with fascination. This technology is human, but it's not in any of our databases. How old is this vessel? About 8,000 years old, Daeho said casually. Built during the Reconstruction period after the Void War. Most human ships from that era were destroyed or hidden away when the new policies went into effect. Salman looked up from her tactical analysis. The weapons systems on this ship are incredible. The power output readings don't make sense. How is something this small more advanced than modern Confederation warships? Because it was designed for a different kind of war, Deho explained. Modern ships are built for civilized conflicts between rational species. This ship was built to fight nightmares from dark space. They traveled for 3 days through hyperspace corridors that didn't appear on any official star charts. Hyunwoo spent most of the time trying to decrypt the data they had stolen from the Crystal Archive, while Ji-won peppered Daeho with questions about humanity's hidden history. "How many humans know the truth?" she asked. "Fewer every generation," Daeho replied sadly. The Confederation's memory suppression programs were very effective. They didn't erase our history violently. They simply stopped teaching it. Within a few centuries, most humans believed the official story about being a young species discovered by benevolent aliens. But some remembered. The archive keepers, families who made it their sacred duty to preserve the real records. They passed the knowledge down through their children, generation after generation, waiting for the day when the truth would be needed again. Their destination was a moon orbiting a gas giant in an unnamed system. From space, it looked like any other dead rock. But as they descended through the thin atmosphere, Ji-won could see structures built into the mountainsides. Ancient buildings that looked human but used architectural principles she didn't recognize. "Welcome to Refuge Prime," Daeho said. "The last monastery of the archive keepers." The landing pad was carved directly into the mountain. As they disembarked, an elderly woman approached them. She was small and bent with age, but her eyes were bright and alert. Her gray hair was pulled back in a simple bun, and she wore robes that looked like they belonged in a museum. "Grandmother Yoonji," Daeho said, bowing respectfully, "I have brought the ones who found the Terminus archive." Grandmother Yoonji studied Ji-won and her team with sharp eyes. "So, the sleepers have finally awakened the old records. I wondered when this day would come." Her voice was soft but carried absolute authority. "Come. There is much you need to see." The monastery was built into a vast cave system inside the mountain. The walls were lined with data storage devices, some so old they looked like they belonged in the Stone Age. But mixed in with the ancient technology were modern holographic displays showing star charts, battle plans, and historical records. 12,000 years of real human history, Grandmother Yoonji explained as she led them deeper into the complex. Every battle, every discovery, every moment that the Confederation wanted erased. They entered a circular chamber where dozens of other humans were working at various stations. All elderly, all wearing the same simple robes. They looked up as the newcomers entered, studying them with curiosity and something that might have been hope. "These are the last archive keepers," Grandmother Yoonji said. "When we die, the knowledge dies with us. Unless—" she looked at Ji-won meaningfully, "unless a new generation takes up the responsibility." Ji-won felt overwhelmed. "I'm just a researcher. I study dead civilizations, not living ones." "Child," Grandmother Yoonji said gently, "you have spent your whole life studying the past. Now you must help shape the future." She led them to a central display that showed a three-dimensional map of the galaxy. Different colored lights marked various star systems, and lines connected them in complex patterns. This is the real map of human expansion during the Void War, Grandmother Yunji explained. We didn't just fight alongside the other species. We led them. Human commanders, human tactics, human psychology. That's what won the war. The display zoomed in on a particular sector. Watch this, Grandmother Yunji said. The Battle of Kepler's Gate. The Void Spawn had surrounded a system containing 3 billion civilian refugees. The Confederation fleet was outnumbered 10-1. The display showed the battle as it unfolded. Alien ships arranged in traditional formations, trying to use their superior numbers and firepower to break through the Void Spawn blockade. But the shadow creatures adapted to every tactic, countering each move perfectly. The aliens were losing, Grandmother Unji continued. Then Commander Taman arrived with a single human ship. A new icon appeared on the display, a small vessel that seemed insignificant compared to the massive fleets around it. But as Ji-won watched, something extraordinary happened. The human ship began moving in patterns that made no tactical sense. Random directions, seemingly suicidal approaches, actions that violated every principle of space combat. "What is he doing?" Minho asked, confused. "Watch the Void Spawn," Grandmother Yunji said. The shadow creatures were trying to respond to the human ship's movements, but they couldn't predict what it would do next. Their perfect coordination began breaking down as they struggled to counter tactics that seemed completely irrational. Commander Taman wasn't fighting the Void Spawn, Grandmother Yunji explained. He was fighting their minds. Every action he took was designed to create psychological pressure on their hive consciousness. He made them doubt themselves, made them afraid, made them confused. The display showed the results. As the Void Spawn fleet fell into chaos, the Confederation forces broke through their lines and evacuated the civilian population. A battle that should have been a massacre became a complete victory. "But that's impossible," Soman said. "How can you use psychology against creatures from another dimension?" "Because Commander Taman understood something that other species couldn't grasp," Grandmother Yunji replied. "All consciousness follows certain patterns. Fear, doubt, confusion. These exist in any mind that can think and plan. Humans are uniquely gifted at recognizing and exploiting these patterns." She changed the display to show another battle. This time, a human officer named Lieutenant Sora was facing a Void Spawn invasion force that had already consumed dozens of worlds. "Watch carefully," Grandmother Unji said. The battle footage showed Lieutenant Sora studying captured Void Spawn specimens. She spent hours observing their behavior, learning their communication methods, understanding how their hive mind functioned. Then she did something incredible. She began broadcasting signals that mimicked their own mental patterns. "She's talking to them," Hyunwoo breathed. "More than talking," Grandmother Yunji said. "She's becoming them, learning to think like they think. Feel what they feel." And once she understood their minds completely, the display showed the devastating result. The Void Spawn fleet turned on itself as their hive mind collapsed into paranoia and fear. Lieutenant Sora had convinced them that they were being betrayed by their own kind, that every other creature in their fleet was a threat to be eliminated. She Won a battle without firing a single shot, Grandmother Yunji said quietly, by understanding her enemies so completely that she could turn their greatest strength, their unity, into their greatest weakness. Ji-won stared at the display in horror and fascination. That's not just tactics. That's something else entirely. It's empathy weaponized, Grandmother Yunji said. The ability to understand other minds so perfectly that you can control them. It's humanity's greatest gift and our most terrible curse. The display changed again, showing a meeting between human and alien leaders after the Void War ended. The aliens looked terrified, even though they had just won the greatest victory in galactic history. The other species realized what they had witnessed, Grandmother Yunji continued. If humans could do this to the Void Spawn, creatures that were completely alien to all known life, what could they do to other galactic species? So they banned us, Ji-won said. They tried to contain us, Grandmother Yunji corrected. The sole incident was their test. They wanted to see if human psychological warfare could be turned against other intelligent species. New footage appeared on the display. A training facility on Earth, where human soldiers were conducting exercises with alien volunteers. What started as friendly competition quickly became something much darker. The human units didn't use violence or torture, Grandmother Yunji explained. They simply observed their alien opponents, learned their psychological patterns, and then systematically broke down their will to fight. Within hours, seasoned alien warriors were reduced to cowering, broken beings who couldn't even hold a weapon. The aliens weren't hurt physically, Daeho added, joining the group. The alarms had been screaming for 3 hours when the first reports started coming in. Ji-won sat in the monastery's communication center, watching news feeds from across the galaxy as the situation rapidly spiraled out of control. Confederation Third Fleet completely destroyed, Admiral Nari's voice crackled through the emergency channels. Ji-won recognized her former mentor immediately, the woman who had taught her everything about deep space exploration and archaeological protocols. No survivors. The enemy used tactics we've never seen before. Grandmother Yunji stood beside her, watching the reports with grim satisfaction. It's beginning exactly as we predicted. The Void Spawn have spent 12,000 years studying Confederation military doctrine. They know every standard formation, every conventional tactic. On the main display, emergency broadcasts showed the aftermath of the attack. Where the Third Fleet had been, only twisted metal and strange energy signatures remained. The Void Spawn had consumed everything, ships, crew, even the wreckage itself. How many people? Minho asked quietly. 50,000, Hyunwoo replied, monitoring the casualty reports. 50,000 beings from a dozen different species, gone in less than an hour. Admiral Nari's image appeared on the screen. She looked older than Ji-won remembered, her face lined with stress and exhaustion. This is Admiral Park Nari of the Confederation Defense Force. I'm sending this message to all archive keeper stations. We need to talk. Grandmother Yunji smiled, without humor. Faster than I expected. The Confederation leadership is finally beginning to understand what they're facing. You knew this would happen, Jiwan said. It wasn't a question. We've been preparing for this day for 12 millennia, Grandmother Yunji replied. Every archive keeper facility has complete battle plans ready. We know where the void spawn will strike next, how they'll adapt to each defensive strategy, and what it will take to stop them. The communication system chimed with an incoming priority message. Admiral Nari's face filled the screen again, but this time she was speaking directly to them. Grandmother Yunji, this is Admiral Nari. I know you're listening. The Confederation Council has authorized me to request immediate consultation with Archive Keeper representatives. We need your help. Deho moved to the communication console. Admiral, this is Deho. I'm with the Archive Keepers. What exactly are you asking for? Advice, intelligence, tactical analysis. Anything that might help us understand what we're fighting. Admiral Nari's voice was tight with controlled panic. These creatures aren't behaving like the historical records suggested they would. They're smarter, more coordinated, more aware. Of course they are, Grandmother Yunji said, taking over the communication. Admiral Nari, this is Grandmother Yunji. The void spawn you're fighting aren't the same creatures we faced 12,000 years ago. They've had time to evolve, to adapt, to learn from their previous defeat. Then how do we fight them? The same way we fought them before. With psychological warfare, adaptive tactics, and human empathy weaponized against their hive mind consciousness. There was a long pause. Grandmother Yunji, you know the Confederation's position on human military involvement. The Council will never authorize unrestricted human combat operations. Then the Council will watch the galaxy burn. Grandmother Yunji replied calmly. Admiral, you have perhaps weeks before the void spawn reach the core systems. Your conventional forces cannot stop them. Only humanity can. The transmission ended. Jiwan stared at the blank screen, processing what she had just heard. You're going to let billions of people die rather than compromise on human military restrictions? Child, Grandmother Yunji said gently. We're not the ones making that choice. The Confederation is. They could lift the military ban tomorrow and have human psychological warfare specialists deployed within days. They choose not to because they're still more afraid of us than they are of extinction. Salmon looked up from her tactical analysis station. The attack patterns are fascinating. Look at this. She projected a three-dimensional display showing the void spawn assault on the Third Fleet. They didn't just destroy the ships. They studied them first. The display showed shadow creatures swarming over Confederation vessels, not attacking, immediately but seeming to observe and learn. Only after several minutes of this behavior did they begin their devastating assault. They're collecting intelligence, Somin continued, learning about current Confederation technology, tactics, and command structures. Every battle makes them smarter, which means every victory they achieve makes the next battle harder for us, Minho added grimly. Hyunwoo was monitoring communication channels across the galaxy. It's getting worse. Reports of void spawn scouts in the Altair system, probing, attacks near the Vegan colonies, and something big moving toward the Centauri trade routes. How big? Jiwan asked. Sensor readings suggest a fleet of at least 1,000 vessels, all showing the same energy signatures as the creatures that destroyed the Third Fleet. Grandmother Yunji activated another display, showing Strategic Star, maps with projected void spawn movement patterns. They're not attacking randomly. Look at their targets: major fleet bases, communication hubs, supply depots. They're systematically dismantling the Confederation's ability to coordinate a defense. Classic human tactics, Deho observed. During the original war, our strategists taught the importance of disrupting enemy command and control structures before launching major offensives. You think they learned that from us? Jiwan asked. I think they learned everything from us, Grandmother Yunji replied. The void spawn are perfect mimics. During the original war, they adapted to counter every tactic we used against them, but they also absorbed and integrated those tactics into their own strategic thinking. Dr. Wu Jin, one of the archive keepers, approached the group with a datapad in his hands. He was younger than most of the others, probably only in his 60s, with sharp eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. Grandmother, I finished analyzing the sensor data from the Third Fleet attack. The results are disturbing. Show us, Grandmother Yunji commanded. Dr. Wu Jin activated a holographic display that showed the energy patterns left behind after the void spawn attack. These signatures don't match the historical records from the original war. The creatures we're facing now have evolved far beyond what they were 12,000 years ago. Evolved how? Jiwan asked. They've developed new abilities, enhanced consciousness manipulation, improved hive mind coordination, and most concerning of all, they seem to have developed defenses against human psychological warfare techniques. The chamber fell silent. If the void spawn had learned to counter humanity's greatest weapon, what hope did anyone have? Not defenses, Grandmother Yunji said slowly. Immunity. They've spent 12,000 years in dark space, studying our methods, developing countermeasures. They're preparing specifically to fight humans. But that's impossible, Somin protested. If they were in dark space, how could they study human tactics? Dr. Wu Jin looked uncomfortable. That's the disturbing part. The energy signatures suggest they've been monitoring our galaxy continuously since their retreat. Watching, learning, adapting. They know everything about current Confederation military doctrine because they've been observing every conflict for 12 millennia. Including human involvement in those conflicts? Jiwan asked. There hasn't been any human involvement, Minho pointed out. We've been banned from military operations for 12,000 years. Exactly, Dr. Wu Jin said grimly. Which means the void spawn have spent 12,000 years preparing to fight everyone except the one species they haven't encountered in modern warfare. The implications hit Jiwan like a physical blow. They're immune to the tactics they remember from the original war, but they have no defense against modern human psychology because they haven't seen it in action. It gets worse, Dr. Wu Jin continued. The monitoring data suggests they've been deliberately avoiding any star system where humans have had significant presence. They're afraid of encountering us unprepared. Admiral Nari's voice interrupted them from the communications console. All archive keeper stations, this is Admiral Nari with emergency update. Confederation Second Fleet has engaged void spawn forces in the Rigel system. Initial results are not encouraging. The main display switched to show real-time battle footage from the Rigel engagement. Confederation ships arranged in perfect geometric formations using textbook tactics that had been successful against conventional enemies for centuries. The void spawn response was devastating in its efficiency. Shadow creatures moved in patterns that seemed random but perfectly countered every Confederation maneuver. Within minutes, the orderly fleet formations had collapsed into chaos. "They're not just winning," Soman observed. "They're toying with the Confederation forces, like they're testing different tactics to see which ones work best." "Because they are," Grandmother Yunji said. "Every battle is a learning experience for them. They're gathering intelligence on current Confederation capabilities while eliminating potential threats." The battle footage showed Confederation Admiral Zhang trying desperately to adapt his tactics in real time. But every change he made, the void spawn countered within minutes. It was like watching someone play chess against an opponent who could see every possible move in. The war room aboard the Confederation flagship Unity's Dawn was filled with desperation. Jiwan had never seen so many high-ranking military officers looking completely lost. Admirals from 6 different species stood around holographic displays, showing battle after battle, each one ending in devastating defeat. 17 fleets destroyed in 5 days, Admiral Nari reported to the assembled commanders. The void spawn aren't just winning, they're learning from every engagement. Each attack is more efficient than the last. Jiwan sat at a consultation table with her team and several other humans the Confederation had quietly brought in as advisors. The official story was still that humans were too dangerous for direct military involvement. But behind closed doors, the panic was real. Captain Dong Hyun, a human military historian who had been working in secret archives for decades, studied the tactical displays with growing concern. "The problem isn't that your strategies are bad," he told the alien commanders. "The problem is that they're predictable." General Voss of the Krugen Empire bristled at the suggestion. "These are time-tested tactics that have served the Confederation for thousands of years." "Against enemies who think like you do," Captain Dong Yun replied calmly. "The void spawn don't think like any known species. Their collective consciousness, entities with completely different psychological patterns." Ambassador Kieran leaned forward. "Then how do we fight them?" "You don't," said Dr. Gina, another human consultant who specialized in xenopsychology. "You can't fight an enemy you don't understand, and you can't understand the void spawn using conventional analysis methods." She activated a holographic display showing brain scan patterns from various species. "Look at this. Krugen thought patterns are based on hierarchical dominance structures. Velothian minds operate through speed-based decision trees. Zephyrian consciousness is collective, but still individual-based." The display shifted to show completely alien patterns, swirling masses of interconnected thought that defied all known psychological models. "This is what void spawn consciousness looks like," Dr. Gina continued. "It's not individual minds working together. It's a single vast intelligence that can fragment itself into millions of components while maintaining perfect coordination." How do you fight something like that? Admiral Nari asked. Juwan found herself speaking before she realized it. You don't fight the components. You fight the intelligence itself. The room fell silent. All eyes turned to her, and she could see the mixture of hope and fear in the alien faces around the table. Explain, Chancellor Thymos commanded through the communication system. Jiwan looked at the tactical displays, seeing patterns that the alien commanders had missed. During the original Void War, human tacticians discovered that the Void Spawn hive mind has psychological vulnerabilities just like any individual consciousness. Fear, doubt, confusion, these can be weaponized against collective intelligence. That's what we need, General Voss said urgently. How do we create fear in a hive mind? You can't, Captain Dongyun said bluntly. Your species don't think the right way. Krugan minds are too direct, too straightforward. Velothian consciousness is too linear. Zephyrian collective thought is too harmonious. But humans can, Dr. Gina added quietly. The aliens exchanged uncomfortable glances. They had asked for consultation, but they were getting answers they didn't want to hear. What makes human psychology different? Ambassador Kieran asked. Jiwan thought about everything she had learned from the archive keepers. We're adapters. Other species have evolved to excel in specific ways. Strength, speed, collective harmony. Humans evolved to survive by becoming whatever the situation required. She activated her own display, showing psychological analysis data. When a Krugan faces an enemy, they think about how to overpower it. When a Velothian encounters a threat, they consider how to outmaneuver it. When humans meet an adversary, we instinctively try to understand it completely. Understand it how? Admiral Nari asked. By thinking like it thinks, feeling what it feels, becoming it, mentally, until we know its weaknesses better than it knows them itself. The room fell silent again. Several alien officers looked disturbed by the implications. You're talking about psychological infiltration, Chancellor Thymos said through the communication system. Mental espionage on a species level. We're talking about empathy, Jiwan corrected. The ability to understand other minds so completely that influencing them becomes possible. Captain Dongyun brought up historical footage from the original Void War. Watch this battle from the Proxima campaign. Human Commander Lee Sora against a Void Spawn fleet of 300 vessels. The display showed a single human ship facing an overwhelming enemy force. But instead of engaging in conventional combat, the human commander began broadcasting complex signals toward the Void Spawn fleet. What is she doing? General Voss asked. Learning their communication patterns, Dr. Gina explained. Commander Sora spent 6 hours studying how the Void Spawn coordinated their movements. Then she began sending signals that mimicked their hive mind. Communications. The battle footage showed the incredible result. The Void Spawn fleet began turning on itself as false commands spread through their communication network. Within minutes, the creatures were destroying each other in complete confusion. She convinced them that parts of their own fleet had been compromised by enemy infiltrators, Captain Donghyun explained. Their hive mind unity became their greatest weakness when they couldn't trust their own thoughts. Admiral Nari stared at the footage in amazement. That's not just tactics. That's something else entirely. It's psychological warfare at the deepest possible level, Jiwan said. The ability to understand an enemy's mind so completely that you can turn their own consciousness against them. Could this technique work against the current void spawn forces? Ambassador Kiran asked hopefully. The humans exchanged glances. Dr. Gina spoke first. Possibly, but it would require direct human involvement in combat operations, not consultation, actual battlefield command authority. The archive keepers have been studying void spawn psychology for 12,000 years, Captain Dong-hyun added. We have detailed analysis of their mental patterns, their fears, their psychological pressure points. But applying that knowledge requires human minds trained in empathetic warfare. Chancellor Thymos's voice carried across the communication system with obvious reluctance. What would such operations require? Complete tactical autonomy, Jiwan found herself saying. Human commanders would need authority to conduct psychological warfare without interference or oversight. The techniques involved are too complex and too dangerous to be subject to committee approval. Dangerous how? General Voss asked. Dr. Gina looked uncomfortable. When you empathize with an enemy mind deeply enough to control it, you risk being changed by that contact. Human psychological warriors from the original war sometimes had difficulty distinguishing between their own thoughts and the thoughts of their enemies. Some never fully recovered their individual identity, Captain Dong-hyun added grimly. The price of understanding other minds completely is sometimes losing yourself in the process. The alien commanders looked horrified. You're asking us to authorize military operations that could drive your own people insane? We're telling you that's what it takes to win against the void spawn, Jiwan replied. The question is whether the Confederation is willing to accept that price. Before anyone could respond, emergency alarms began blaring throughout the ship. Admiral Nari rushed to a communication console as urgent reports flooded in. Void spawn forces have broken through the Rigel defense line, she announced. They're moving toward the Centauri system, 3 billion civilians in their path. Time to evacuation, Chancellor Thymos asked. 18 hours, Admiral Nari replied. Our fastest ships can't move that many people in time. Then we fight them, General Voss declared. With what? Admiral Nari demanded. We've lost 21 fleets in 6 days. The void spawn are adapting faster than we can develop new tactics. G1 studied the tactical displays showing the void spawn advance. She could see patterns in their movement, psychological motivations behind their targeting choices. But more importantly, she could see their weaknesses. They're not as confident as they appear, she said suddenly. Everyone turned to look at her. What do you mean? Admiral Nari asked. Look at their attack patterns. They're avoiding certain star systems, systems where humans had significant presence during the original war. They're still afraid of encountering human psychological warfare unprepared. Dr. Gina leaned over the displays, studying the data. You're right. They're taking longer routes to avoid systems like Sol, Alpha Centauri, and Kepler, systems with large human populations. They know we're here, Captain Dong-Hyun realized. They know humans are advising the Confederation forces. That's why they're accelerating their attacks. They want to win before we can develop effective countermeasures. Chancellor Thymos's voice carried a note of desperation. Can conventional forces hold them long enough to evacuate Centauri? No, Admiral Nari said bluntly. The mathematical certainty is 0. They'll overrun our defensive positions in less than 12 hours. The war room fell silent. 3 billion lives hung in the balance, and everyone knew conventional tactics would fail. The coordinates led them to what looked like empty space in the Titan Nebula. Ji-won's ship followed the encrypted navigation data that Grandmother Yunji had given them, moving through clouds of stellar dust that blocked most sensor readings. For 3 hours, they saw nothing but swirling gas and distant stars. Then the hidden fleet revealed itself. Ships materialized out of the nebula like ghosts becoming solid. Not just a few vessels, but hundreds of them. Each one was clearly human, in design, but unlike anything in the official databases. These ships looked organic, almost alive, with hull patterns that seemed to shift and change as Ji-won watched. My God, Minho whispered, staring at the massive vessels surrounding them. How long have they been here? 12,000 years, came a voice over their communication system. Welcome to the real human fleet. The voice belonged to Fleet Admiral Kyung, a woman who looked to be in her 50s but carried herself with the authority of someone who had commanded warships for centuries. Her uniform was human in style, but bore rank insignia that didn't exist in any official military structure. Commander Park Ji-won, Admiral Kyung said as they docked with the flagship. Grandmother Yunji told us you might be coming. Though I admit, we hoped this day would never arrive. The interior of the ship was unlike anything Ji-won had ever seen. The corridors seemed to pulse with their own light, and the walls displayed constantly changing tactical information. Crew members moved with practiced efficiency, but their equipment and procedures were completely foreign. This is impossible, Somin said, studying the technology around them. These ships are more advanced than anything the Confederation has. Where did they come from? We built them, Admiral Kyung replied simply. Over 12,000 years of isolation, human engineering has evolved in directions the Confederation never imagined. They were led to a command center that stretched across multiple levels of the ship. Hundreds of officers worked at stations that seemed to respond to thought as much as touch. Holographic displays showed real-time intelligence from across the galaxy, including detailed tracking of every void spawn movement. You've been watching the war, Ji-won observed. We've been watching everything, Admiral Kyung confirmed. Every battle, every tactical decision, every failure. The Confederation's military doctrine is exactly what we predicted it would be. Completely inadequate for fighting the void spawn. Commander So-young approached from one of the tactical stations. She was young, probably in her 30s, but her eyes held the kind of cold intelligence that Ji-won had learned to associate with professional psychological warriors. The Confederation fleets fight like they're playing chess, Commander So-young explained. Logical moves, predictable strategies, rational responses to known threats. The void spawn don't play chess. What do they play? Hyun-woo asked. They don't play anything, Admiral Kyung replied. They think, they feel, they fear. They have a collective consciousness with individual psychological patterns, and those patterns can be exploited by anyone who understands how minds work. Chief Engineer Bayomgyu joined the group, carrying a data pad filled with technical specifications. He was older, probably in his 60s, with the confident manner of someone who had spent decades perfecting impossible technologies. We've spent 12 millennia preparing for this war, he said, showing them weapon designs that looked more like art than engineering. Every ship in this fleet is equipped with psychological warfare systems specifically designed to attack void spawn consciousness. The displays showed weapons that didn't fire energy or projectiles, but transmitted complex psychological patterns directly into enemy minds. Ships that could camouflage themselves not just visually, but psychically, becoming invisible to void. Spawn perception. How is this possible? Minho asked, studying the technical data. Because we never stopped being warriors, Admiral Kyung said. The Confederation banned humans from military service, but they couldn't ban us from preparing for the war we knew would come. General Minji stepped forward from another station. She was perhaps the most intimidating person Ji-won had ever met. Tall, lean, with silver hair and eyes that seemed to see through everything they looked at. Commander Park, General Minji said. Grandmother Yoonji sent word that the Confederation has finally requested human assistance. Limited consultation, I assume? They're desperate, Ji-won replied. 3 billion people in the Centauri system are about to be overrun. The Confederation asked for tactical advice, but they're still afraid to authorize direct human military involvement. General Minji smiled, and it was not a pleasant expression. Afraid of us, but not afraid of extinction. How wonderfully consistent. Can you help them? Ji-won asked. Help them, Admiral Kyung repeated. Commander, we can end this war in 2 weeks. We have battle plans that have been refined for 12,000 years. We know exactly where the void spawn will strike next, how they'll adapt their tactics, and what psychological pressures will cause their hive mind to collapse. She activated a holographic display showing the entire galaxy with projected void spawn movements. But we won't do it under Confederation oversight. We won't submit our tactics for committee approval, and we won't operate under the same restrictions that led to our banishment in the first place. What are you asking for? Ji-won said, though she suspected she already knew. Complete tactical autonomy, General Minji replied. Authorization to conduct psychological warfare without interference. Permission to use whatever methods we deem necessary to protect galactic civilization. The Confederation will never agree to that, Soman said. Then the Confederation will fall, Admiral Kyung said simply. And when the void spawn move on to consume other regions of space, we'll protect what we can and let the rest burn. Commander So-young brought up detailed analysis of the current void spawn forces. Look at this intelligence data. The creatures attacking Confederation space aren't just the same species we fought 12,000 years ago. They've evolved specifically to counter non-human psychology. The displays showed void spawn tactical adaptations, defenses against Krugan aggression, counters to Velothian speed, systems designed to disrupt Zephyrian collective harmony. But notably absent were any defenses against human psychological warfare. They remember us from the original war, Chief Engineer Beomgyu explained. They know human tactics from 12,000 years ago are dangerous, but they have no data on modern human psychological warfare because we've been banned from combat. So they're vulnerable to current human methods? Jiwon asked. Completely vulnerable, General Minji confirmed. We've spent 12 millennia developing techniques they've never encountered. Our psychological warfare capabilities are so far beyond what they remember that they might as well be fighting blind. Admiral Kyung activated another display showing fleet deployment options. We could have ships in position to defend Centauri within 18 hours. The Void Spawn advance would be stopped completely, and their entire invasion fleet would be neutralized within days. But Jiwon sensed there was more. But once we deploy, there's no going back, Admiral Kyung said seriously. The galaxy will see what human warfare really looks like when we're not holding back. Other species will understand exactly why they were afraid of us in the first place. And you're willing to accept that? Jiwon asked. Commander, General Minji said quietly, we've been preparing for this decision for 12,000 years. The question isn't whether we're willing to reveal what humanity is capable of. The question is whether the galaxy is ready to see it. The command center fell silent as everyone contemplated the implications. Humanity's secret fleet could save billions of lives and end the void spawn threat permanently. But doing so would forever change how other species viewed human nature. There's something else you need to understand, Admiral Kyung said. Our psychological warfare techniques aren't just more advanced than what was used in the original war. They're fundamentally different. We've learned to weaponize empathy on a scale that would terrify even our own ancestors. She activated a training simulation that showed human officers conducting what looked like telepathic communication with holographic enemy forces. But instead of simple communication, the humans were systematically breaking down the psychological defenses of their opponents through pure understanding. We call it empathetic dominance, Commander So-young explained. The ability to understand another consciousness so completely that controlling it becomes effortless. Not through force or coercion, but through perfect comprehension of how that mind works. That's not warfare, Minho said, disturbed by what he was seeing. That's something else entirely. It's evolution, General Minji replied. 12,000 years of isolated development have taken human psychological capabilities far beyond what they were during the original Void War. We don't just understand our enemies anymore, we become them psychologically until we can control them as easily as we control our own thoughts. Jiwon stared at the simulation, watching human warriors systematically dismantling enemy psychology through pure empathetic analysis. It was beautiful and terrifying at the same time. What happens to your people after extended exposure to this kind of warfare? She asked. Some adapt, Admiral Kyung said honestly. Others don't. The Confederation Council meeting was held in emergency session aboard the flagship Unity's Dawn. For the first time in 12,000 years, the galaxy's leaders were being asked to authorize unrestricted human military operations. The tension in the council chamber was thick enough to cut with a knife. Chancellor Thymos floated at the center of the room, his crystalline form pulsing with agitated light. Around him, representatives from every major species argued in voices that the universal translators could barely keep up with. "Absolutely not," declared General Voss, his massive Krugen frame towering over the other delegates. "We all know what happened during the Sol incident. Humans cannot be trusted with unlimited warfare authority. 3 billion people in Centauri system are already dead because of your conventional tactics," President Hanul replied calmly. She had arrived only hours before as the elected representative of humanity's hidden colonies, and her presence had shocked the entire council. "How many more must die before you admit that your fear is more dangerous than our capabilities?" Ambassador Kirin looked troubled. "President Hanul, surely you understand our concerns. Human psychological warfare techniques are disturbing to other species. The potential for abuse is enormous." "More disturbing than extinction?" Jiwan asked from her position at the consultation table. "Because that's what you're facing. The Void Spawn fleet heading for Earth is 3 times larger than anything they've deployed so far. They're not just trying to win this war. They're trying to eliminate humanity before we can help you." Admiral Nari activated the tactical displays showing the approaching Void Spawn forces. The numbers were staggering. Over 10,000 vessels, all showing the same dark energy signatures that had already destroyed dozens of Confederation fleets. "Even if we authorized human military operations," Admiral Nari said reluctantly, "how do we know they can actually stop a force this size? The historical records from the original Void War show nothing on this scale. Because we've spent 12,000 years preparing for exactly this scenario," Fleet Admiral Kyung replied through the communication system from her hidden fleet. "Every battle plan, every tactical simulation, every psychological warfare technique we've developed has been designed around the assumption that we would eventually face an overwhelming Void Spawn force." The main display shifted to show the human fleet emerging from the Titan Nebula. Even the Confederation's advanced sensors had trouble getting clear readings on the vessels. They seemed to shift and blur, as if they existed only partially in normal space. "Those ships," whispered Dr. Vex, the Council's chief scientific advisor. "They're using technology we don't understand. Psychic camouflage, consciousness manipulation fields, weapons that attack the mind directly. This is beyond anything in our databases." "It's beyond anything in any database," President Hanul said, "because we developed it in complete isolation, without outside influence or limitation. Human science and technology evolved along paths you never imagined." Chancellor Thymos pulsed brighter. "And that is precisely what terrifies us. If humanity has been developing these capabilities in secret for 12 millennia, what else have you been hiding from the Confederation?" "Nothing," President Hanul replied. "And everything. We've been hiding our true nature because you asked us to. But now, the galaxy is facing extinction, and you need our true nature to survive." Before anyone could respond, emergency alarms began blaring throughout the ship. Admiral Nari rushed to her communication console as urgent reports flooded in from deep space monitoring stations. The Void Spawn fleet has accelerated again, she announced. They'll reach Earth's outer system in 18 hours, but that's not the worst news. She paused, her face pale. 3 more fleets have been detected emerging from dark space. They're converging on major population centers across the galaxy. The tactical display showed the terrifying scope of the new threat. Void Spawn forces were simultaneously approaching the Zephyrian home system, the Krugan capital world, and the Velothian trade nexus. Each fleet was massive enough to overwhelm any conventional defense. It's a coordinated extermination campaign, General Voss said grimly. They're not just trying to conquer territory. They're trying to eliminate every major species in the galaxy simultaneously. Why now? Ambassador Kieran asked. Why reveal their full strength at this moment? Jiwan studied the attack patterns and felt a chill of understanding. Because they know we're here. They've detected the human fleet's movements. They're trying to overwhelm us with multiple targets so we can't focus our psychological warfare on any single front. Can your hidden fleet handle 4 simultaneous battles? Chancellor Thymos asked President Hanul. Not under Confederation oversight, President Hanul replied bluntly. Not with committee approval for every tactical decision, not with restrictions on what methods we can use. But if you give us complete autonomy, she paused meaningfully. Yes, we can save every threatened system. The risks, began Dr. Vex. The risks are acceptable, Admiral Nari interrupted, surprising everyone. I've watched conventional forces fail against the Void Spawn for weeks. I've seen brilliant tactical minds reduced to helpless confusion by an enemy that thinks in ways we can't comprehend. If humanity says they can stop this threat, I believe them. General Voss slammed his armored fist on the table. And when this crisis is over, when humanity has demonstrated the full extent of their psychological warfare capabilities, what then? Do we simply trust that they'll voluntarily return to their peaceful role? General, President Hanul said quietly, humanity never stopped being peaceful. We've spent 12,000 years in isolation, developing these capabilities solely as preparation for the Void Spawn's return. We have no interest in conquering other species or dominating galactic politics. Then why maintain such an advanced military fleet in secret? Because someone had to be ready, President Hanul replied. The Confederation's military doctrine was specifically designed to function without human involvement. That made it completely useless against an enemy that had spent 12 millennia preparing to fight non-human psychology. We knew that when the Void Spawn returned, conventional forces would fail, so we prepared alternatives. Captain Jamin's voice came through the communication system from the human fleet. Council members, this is Captain Jamin of the Strike Force Resilience. We're detecting massive Void Spawn movement in the outer system. They've begun preliminary psychological scanning of Earth's population centers. What does that mean? Ambassador, Kieran asked. They're analyzing human psychological patterns to develop countermeasures against our warfare techniques, General Minji explained through another channel. If they complete their scans before we engage them, they'll be able to defend against human empathetic attacks. How long do we have? Chancellor Thymos asked. Perhaps 6 hours, Captain Jamin replied. After that, our psychological advantages will be significantly reduced. The council chamber fell silent. Every representative understood the implications. The window for human intervention was closing rapidly, and with it, the galaxy's last hope for survival. "I call for an emergency vote," Admiral Nari declared. "All in favor of granting humanity complete tactical autonomy to engage the void spawn threat." "Seconded," said Chancellor Thymos, his crystalline form now pulsing with resigned determination. The vote was swift, but not unanimous. The Krugan delegation voted against, as did several smaller species representatives, but the majority carried, and humanity was officially authorized to deploy unrestricted psychological warfare for the first time in 12,000 years. President Hanol, Chancellor Thymos said formally, "By the authority of the Galactic Confederation, Council, human forces are granted complete tactical autonomy to address the current void spawn threat. May the ancestors help us all." President Hanol bowed respectfully. "Council members, you will not regret this decision. Humanity will demonstrate that our capabilities, however frightening they may seem, are dedicated to protecting all conscious life in the galaxy." Fleet Admiral Kyung's voice came through the communication system with grim satisfaction. "All human fleet elements, this is Fleet Command. We are authorized for unrestricted operations. Begin psychological warfare deployment immediately." The first engagement began before the council session had even ended. Long-range sensors showed the human fleet moving into position around Earth, but their tactics were unlike anything the Confederation observers had ever seen. Instead of forming traditional battle lines, the human ships spread out in seemingly random patterns. Each vessel began broadcasting complex signals toward the approaching void spawn fleet, not communication attempts, but direct psychological attacks on the creature's hive mind consciousness. "What are they doing?" General Voss asked, studying the tactical displays. "They're not fighting the void spawn ships," Jiwan realized. "They're fighting the void spawn minds. Every signal they're transmitting is designed to create confusion, fear, and doubt within the hive mind network. The results were visible within minutes. The perfectly coordinated void spawn advance began showing signs of uncertainty. Ships that had been moving in flawless formation started deviating from their courses. The creature's legendary unity was beginning to crack under the pressure of... 1 year after the Void Spawn War ended, Jiwan stood in the observation deck of the new Galactic Confederation headquarters, watching ships from a dozen species dock at the massive space station. The galaxy had changed in ways that no one could have predicted. The war itself had lasted only 3 weeks, once humanity was given unrestricted combat authority. Fleet Admiral Kyung's forces had systematically dismantled every void spawn fleet through psychological warfare so precise and devastating that most enemy vessels surrendered without firing a shot. The creatures that had terrorized the galaxy for millennia simply gave up. But the aftermath had proven more challenging than the war itself. "Commander Park," Ambassador Sunwoo said as he approached. The new human representative to the Confederation was young, perhaps 40, but he carried himself with the quiet confidence that had become characteristic of humanity's new diplomatic corps. "The Council is ready for your final report." Ji-won nodded, gathering the data tablets she had been reviewing. Her role had evolved dramatically over the past year. No longer just an archaeological researcher, she had become humanity's primary liaison for what the bureaucrats politely called post-conflict integration issues. The council chamber had been redesigned since the war. The old circular arrangement that emphasized equality among species had been replaced with a more complex configuration that acknowledged new realities. Humanity's section was smaller than the others, but positioned where every other delegation could see it clearly. "The final assessment is complete," Ji-won announced to the assembled representatives. "The void spawn threat has been permanently neutralized. Deep space monitoring stations report no hostile activity in any surveyed sector." Chancellor Thymos, still the Confederation's nominal leader, pulsed with cautious relief. "And the method of neutralization?" "Psychological rehabilitation," Ji-won replied, using the official terminology that had been developed to describe what humanity had actually done. "The void spawn collective consciousness was restructured to eliminate aggressive impulses toward other life forms. They have returned to dark space voluntarily and will not threaten inhabited systems again." What she didn't say, because everyone already understood, was that humanity had essentially rewritten the minds of an entire species. Not through force or coercion, but through empathetic understanding so complete that the void spawn had been convinced to change their fundamental nature. General Voss, representing the Krugen Empire, leaned forward. "Commander, we need to address the broader implications of human psychological capabilities. The techniques demonstrated during the war have raised concerns among the member species." "What kind of concerns?" Ambassador Sunwoo asked, though his tone suggested he already knew. "The kind that led to humanity's original banishment," Admiral Nari said bluntly. She had been promoted to head of Confederation Defense Forces after the war, partly in recognition of her role in authorizing human intervention. "Other species are afraid, Ambassador. Afraid of what humans might do now that everyone has seen your full capabilities." Ji-won activated a holographic display showing post-war survey data. Psychological analysis of member species populations shows elevated anxiety levels regarding human intentions, fear of mental manipulation, concerns about free will, and general unease about coexisting with beings capable of rewriting consciousness itself. "Are these fears justified?" Chancellor Thymos asked directly. Ambassador Sunwoo considered the question carefully. "That depends on what you mean by justified. Can humans manipulate the minds of other species? Yes. Do we intend to? No. But I understand why the distinction might not be comforting." The chamber fell silent as everyone contemplated the implications. Humanity had saved the galaxy, but in doing so had revealed capabilities that terrified their allies almost as much as their enemies. Dr. Vex, still serving as the Council's scientific advisor, spoke up. "The question before us is simple. How does galactic civilization proceed when one species possesses abilities that could theoretically control all others? The same way it proceeded for 12,000 years, President Hanyul said, as she joined the session via holographic projection from Earth. with humanity voluntarily restricting its own capabilities for the greater good. But the restrictions didn't work before, General Voss pointed out. You maintained advanced military capabilities in secret. You developed psychological warfare, techniques far beyond anything from the original Void War. How do we know you won't do the same again? President Hanel smiled, and there was something both sad and knowing in her expression. General, you're asking the wrong question. You shouldn't be asking how to control humanity. You should be asking why we've never tried to control you. Explain, Chancellor Thymus requested. For 12,000 years, humanity has possessed the ability to psychologically dominate other species, President Hanel said. We could have ended the ban on our military participation at any time. We could have taken control of Confederation, leadership, manipulated galactic politics, or established human supremacy across known space. She paused, letting that sink in. We didn't. Not because we couldn't, but because we chose not to. The question isn't whether humanity has the power to control other species. The question is why we consistently choose not to use that power. Ambassador. Kieran looked troubled. And what is the answer to that question? Because controlling other minds is not the same as understanding them, Jiwan said. True empathy, the kind that allows for psychological warfare, requires recognizing the inherent value of other consciousness. You cannot truly understand a mind without respecting its right to exist independently. That's a very philosophical answer, Dr. Vex observed. But philosophy might not be enough to reassure populations who fear mental manipulation. Then perhaps, Ambassador Sunwoo said carefully, we need to discuss practical solutions rather than theoretical concerns. He activated a new display showing proposed changes to galactic governance structures. President Hanol and the human colonies have developed a proposal for addressing the current situation. The display showed a radical restructuring of human confederation relations. Instead of trying to reintegrate humanity into normal galactic society, the proposal suggested a different approach entirely. We propose to formalize humanity's role as the galaxy's immune system, President Hanul explained. Officially, publicly, and permanently. Meaning? Chancellor Thymos asked. Meaning we acknowledge what everyone already knows? Ambassador Sunwoo replied. Humanity's psychological capabilities make us unsuitable for normal military or political participation. But those same capabilities make us uniquely qualified to defend against threats that conventional forces cannot handle. The proposal was elegant in its simplicity. Humans would remain officially banned from galactic warfare, not as punishment, but as recognition of their specialized role. They would maintain hidden fleets and defensive capabilities, but only deploy them against existential threats that endangered all galactic civilization. You're proposing to become a secret guardian species, Admiral Nari said, studying the documents. We're proposing to become what we've always been, President Hanul corrected. The species that other species call when the universe presents problems that cannot be solved through conventional means. General Voss looked skeptical. And you would accept permanent isolation from galactic society? We've been isolated for 12,000 years, Jiwan pointed out. The only difference would be making it official policy rather than unofficial fear. There would be benefits for everyone, Ambassador Sunwoo continued. Other species could continue their civilized conflicts and political developments without worrying about human psychological interference. Humanity could maintain the capabilities necessary to protect the galaxy without causing general anxiety, and everyone could sleep better knowing that if another existential threat emerges, we'll be ready. Chancellor Thymos pulsed thoughtfully. This would require unprecedented transparency from humanity. Regular inspections, monitoring protocols, verification that you're not using your capabilities for unauthorized purposes. Agreed, President Hanul said immediately. With one condition, the monitoring must be conducted by joint committees that include human representatives. We won't accept oversight systems that treat us as potential enemies rather than voluntary guardians. The debate continued for hours, but the outcome was never really in doubt. The galaxy had seen what humanity could do when fully unleashed, and the vast majority of species preferred the certainty of voluntary human isolation to the uncertainty of trying to control capabilities they didn't understand. The final vote was nearly unanimous. Humanity would be officially designated as a protected guardian species, banned from normal galactic military and political participation, but authorized to maintain whatever defensive capabilities they deemed necessary for protecting all civilized life. There's one more thing, Jiwan said as the session was concluding. The archive keepers have requested permission to establish teaching facilities on worlds throughout the Confederation. Teaching what? Admiral Nari asked suspiciously. Basic psychological defense techniques, Ambassador Sunwoo explained. Methods for recognizing and resisting mental manipulation.